Welcome to the business end. Today's guest has spent most of his career in environments where a bad decision under pressure doesn't just cost a result, it costs a life, a season, or someone's safety. Ken Frank served in the Royal Australian Navy, specialising in weapons ordnance and electrical propulsion systems. He returned to New Zealand, built Franks Brothers Performance in Christchurch into one of the country's most respected strength and conditioning operations, and watched two of his athletes, or sons, Ben and Owen, become All Blacks, World Cup winners and cornerstones of the Crusaders dynasty. Since 2017, Ken has been the cognitive performance coach embedded with Canterbury Mitre 10 Cup programme, and since 2018 he's brought the same methodology to the New Zealand Police as a cognitive conditioning specialist, applying it to recruits and officers operating in a different category of high stakes environment entirely. What connects everything that Ken builds is a single uncomfortable observation. There is a significant gap between what people know how to do under pressure and what they actually do under stress and when it arrives. His answer to that gap is CogCon, a program that doesn't just teach mental skills, it teaches cognitive fitness. Progressively under physical load, the same way you build a physical foundation.
So let's crack on and get into it. So, as Liam said there, you served in the Royal Australian Navy before coming back to New Zealand and building Frank Brothers. There's obviously a different kind of pressure in the military compared to sport or business. Those decisions have consequences that can be permanent. When you look back at your time in the Navy, what did it show you about how people actually perform under high stakes conditions versus how they train to perform?
Yeah, well, I think the two are interlinked. When I was in the Navy, I was in quite a junior position, and you really had to default back to discipline and really overlearning the skills that you needed to apply under pressure. So really just overlearning the skill. And through that discipline, I don't mean what you see on TV, but having the discipline that when it's time to gas on, you flip the switch and it's business time, and actually a lot of the training that you've done comes to the fore because you've overtrained it. And then equally having that ability to gas off when there's moments where, okay, there's a bit of downtime now. We actually need to ditch some of that stress and just chill out a bit. Probably a little bit different to the question if I fast forward a bit is what I see with we're also working with the Army and the Navy presently, and yeah, just that ability, I suppose, to be able to overtrain, so those skills will come out to you under pressure.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So when you were obviously you're heavily involved with both Owen and Ben when you were training them, did you ever spot gaps when they were training? They were doing stuff in the gym or on the training field. They couldn't quite deliver on the pitch, and if that did happen, what were the first signals to you of that gap, and how did you prevent that happening if you saw it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's always been sort of almost worked as a team. I think between the three of us, they've always been really good at not being able to identify what went wrong in the game and sort of not have that emotion behind it, and then work out, well, how are we going to turn that round? And pretty well early on for them, it was like, what's going to make them stick out against all the other props that are out there? And obviously it was the skills, and we definitely needed their fitness and to come through for fit for purpose for what they wanted. But equally, we also knew the top 6 inches played a big part. And so how could we start training that take the emotion out of it? So, what happens if someone's shit talking to you? How do you deal to that? What happens if scrum doesn't go quite your way? How do you not listen to that little voice in your head and actually just get up and attack again? And just keep working on those skills, because they're the ones that will set you apart. And particularly in rugby, it became very much, once you get on top of that yourself, It then allows you to see the sight picture of the person opposite you. So you're squared away now. So if someone's shit talking to you, how can you turn it around on them? So they'll do something dumb and give a penalty away, or how do you get into their head and get them suboptimal, and how do you train for that? Yeah, so a lot of that we brought into the gym. The gym to us just wasn't somewhere to lift. There was always, why are you doing that lift? What's the why behind you doing that lift? And that's every lift you do is so sometimes we would show pictures of a prop absolutely smashing someone. This is what you're doing in the gym, so you can do this on Saturday. And you might be going for a heavy lift and you didn't quite get it today. Or what we don't want to see is you shake your head, slap your hands together and get emotional. Because that's just a free repetition of training that you've done in the gym now. You get emotional when something doesn't go your way. So there's a lot you can do off the field to steer what you want to do on the field. And that sort of started setting us on the path of how do we actually train this and not just talk about it.
That's really interesting. Did you explain the why as to what you were doing while you were doing it? So as you said there, okay, you're doing this lift because you want this outcome on the pitch, for example. Did you explain to them why you were doing that, or just say it? I'm curious to know what the methodology was like.
No, it's all important. Yeah, that's a big part of it. I mean, you don't want to go into war and peace and talk for the next 10 minutes about what you want to do, but you want something sharp that they'll buy into. And sometimes I remember with Owen, we just made up a montage or like a poster that had him setting up for a scrum, scrummaging well, smashing someone in a tackle. And we would just tape that up in front of the squat stand, so you had no option but to look at it before you squatted. So it really set a sight picture for you of why you're doing that. Sometimes it was like, let's have a suboptimal break in between lifts because it's not always going to be perfect on the field. And can you get stronger having a suboptimal rest period? Because that'll happen for you under the game. So it's really just chucking all that out and really making sure. Sometimes I see it, like I said, you can gas off between a lift. So I might be sitting down listening to some music or cracking a joke, but as soon as you flip the switch that it's time to lift now, that needs to stop, and then you put your business face on. Caught anyone still sort of laughing or smirking a bit from the joke and they're setting up on the bar, then pull them away from it and get them to get their head in the game and then lift. So these are just all pretty simple things, but if you do them regularly and consistent, you're setting a strong message to those individuals.
Yeah, so I mean, you spoke earlier before we came on the show about chaos, and if you're in a conflict, traumatic situation, the goal is to cause chaos on the other side. Where would you, like, from a business perspective, where would you see that level of trauma or stress played out in business, do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm only guesstimating here because that's definitely not my lane. Equally, I presume sometimes on a management level, you might have 10 people around the table and they're all pretty passionate and there might just be a lot of talking, but you've got one person in the corner. If you listen to the way they're talking, they're emotional. So they're not thinking now. You've got someone else across the table. They've already got in their mind what they want out of this meeting. So they're not actively listening. They're just waiting for an opportunity to voice what they want to say. And then all of a sudden, it's starting to turn in their realms to a little bit of chaos now because we just haven't had that almost training to pick up when you are emotional. How do you quickly get back into that optimal to get your clear thinking on? Again, it could be chaos for anyone where they've read a shit email and all of a sudden those keypads are typing on the response because they've sort of got into a bit of a fight flight now, and they haven't just taken that, we call it a tactical pause, to get back into that optimal. So there's probably in business quite a few things that equate to that, but that's, yeah, I'm just guesstimating a little bit there.
No, it's true, Ken, because I was speaking to a guy last week, and I was saying that we were doing an event with someone, and we were talking about execution under pressure. I said, and he said, well, I've been running a business for 20 years. What are you talking about? I dealt with pressure all the time. And I said, well, yeah, that's the point. Yeah, you've been dealing with like pressure that's more like built up over time. But in business, they'll come to certain points where you have to like execute under pressure. And that could be you're about to lose a client and you've got to make a judgment decision in 10 seconds, or you're at a presentation. And that's where I think it overlaps into business, that ability, and where I don't know any business leaders that train for that sort of pressure. That's a high pressure environment in business, you know?
Yeah, I think so. And you always look at people, whether it's in business, sport, or tactical, you get people that are just absolutely brilliant at this, but they've been doing it for a long time now. Whereas I suppose in our world a little bit, how can we aid to, you can't beat experience, but how do we do two things? Can we shorten that time frame to get the experience? And at the end of the day, can we keep them safe while they're building that experience? And again, that comes back to the top 6 inches and staying in that optimal space. That's the big one.
Do you think as well, like if someone's in a high pressure situation in business or maybe even sport, and I was looking at Lewis Hamilton and his track record, and like when he's under pressure, he goes quiet for about a week. And during that time, gossip will come in, you know, and then you see other people like Richard Branson, and he doesn't stop talking during pressure, but he's never specific, you know, about it. Do you think there's like with conflict, traumatic situations that you're training people to react correctly and quickly?
Yeah, but everyone reacts differently. And one of the things I think we do that probably sport to tap into a bit is we track stress heart rate live. We have a few analytics around, but we heart rate them up, and we're tracking a few things, but we can tell in live time in a training when someone's in a hard stress response and their decision making is poor, that we can now tie it back to they had a stress response, and we need to train that with that individual. Other individuals, they're in a really good headspace, but they're just making poor decisions. So that's more going back to the coaching staff and saying their tactical knowledge isn't where it needs to be. So they're not stressed, they just don't have the tactical knowledge. And so we're feeding that back in live time. And again, I could be doing sport and injustice, but haven't been around it for a few years, but I know they mainly tracked heart rate to look at how physically worn out an athlete was, rather than you could have someone up in the coach's box watching all the athletes, and you might be deciding that a particular player, you're going to pull them off, and when it gets to 50 minutes into the game, you're going to take them off. But it's 30 minutes in, and they've been in quite a hard stress response for a wee while now. That's why they're making some poor decisions. It's probably a good time to take them off now, or the other way around. Even to the point you could be tracking the coaches and tracking them in live time. So now if they're starting to get emotional and send some maybe suboptimal signals down to the coaching staff on the paddock, you can real quick show them where they're sitting, and that'll be the trigger for them to then get on top of that stress response. So it adds not only to the coaching staff to make their decision-making quality if it's going a bit pear-shaped, but also lifetime tracking the individuals in the team and knowing exactly where they are. Because you might find, I suppose as another example, Johnny's just given away a penalty, and that's led to a try, and we can see Johnny now behind the goal line. We can see he's hard in a stress response. It would almost get a message down to the coaching staff to get him to do, some of the breathing we do or whatever it is like that. We need to get him out of that before they kick off, because if he's still in that state and we kick off, he's liable to go and do something dumb. So that's the
Yes.
sort of level you could track, and I think that's something you could take from the
Yeah.
tactical back to sport.
I probably know the answer to this question, so forgive me if it sounds a bit dumb here, but do you think some people just got a natural ability when the pressure comes on, they make the right decisions, they react quickly and can deal with the load? Or do you think, can this all be taught? I probably think it's going to be the latter, that everyone can be taught how to deal with the pressure.
Yeah, everyone can be taught. We have some quite rigorous testing that's been verified by science, and we can know. So if you've got someone coming into a team, like us, if we've got someone coming into a selection, we can look at them and go, look, this person is naturally keeping on top of their stress response. They're naturally doing it without any training, but they're lacking a little bit in their technical, tactical knowledge, where you might have someone else that's, for this selection, is more proficient at their technical, tactical, but is showing us they're likely to get a little bit more emotional. So who are you going to take through to the team? Because you've got one person that's lacking a little bit of training, but naturally off the bat, they're really good at keeping on top of their stress response. And you have someone else that's done a little bit more in the tactical space, but they're showing signs that they potentially could get dragged into the red sooner. So we have that ability early on, and that would be similar. That would be quite nice in sport if you had someone that's naturally gifted, a little bit better than another player, but one player over the other is more likely to stay on top of their stress response. I think I know who I would be looking at bringing through, particularly for me, it's quite frustrating. You watch games now, and how many games where a team's lost, you talk to the coach and they go decision making under pressure. And then I follow that up by, well, how do you train for it? Because I'm pretty sure you don't. Yet you always keep highlighting it's one of the major things that's letting your team down.
Just to follow up on that quickly, so which for you would have the most upside? The naturally mentally resilient guy with the lack of or a lower level of technical tactical, or the guy with the more operational knowledge but perhaps a little bit more emotional, to use those two descriptors?
Yeah, that information gets fed back to the bosses in the team, and that's their dilemma. But for me, as long as there's not a big gap, you can train technical, tactical knowledge. It is harder in getting if you've got someone naturally already on top of that stress response. That's a big plus, I think, anyway.
So mental skills programs have been out there and embedded in elite sport for a long time. You made a deliberate choice to move away from that model entirely. That's not a small call. What were the specific moments, real situations, real people where you watched mental skills approach fail to hold up under operational stress?
Yeah, I think if we just look at the model a little bit, I think there's definitely, there's some good mental skills out there and there's some good information, but the current model and what made us look at something different was usually it's someone, an expert coming, and they will give you a PowerPoint presentation, and a lot of mental skills is education, coping strategies and everything like that, setting goals. Something not happening right for you at home, how do we get your head back in the game again? So as for individuals, it can work, but overall it's a team game. So whether it's tactical or whether it's, say, rugby, it's a team game. And more often than not, you've just got someone talking at you. So if we use the same analogy, in tactical, then it was that easy. Why do we train someone to shoot when we can just give them a PowerPoint and send them away, and away they go, and leave it up to the individual to train it? That was the big one for us. And sometimes just having the mental skills, and this is not everyone, and I don't want to lump everyone in the same boat, but been to a number now where maybe the mental skills person doesn't fully understand the team that they're in, and they might be explaining things with using big words to explain something that's happening in your brain, and it's like, but that's not relating to the team. And quite often you would finish and go, Yeah, good talk, but how does that relate to me? How does that relate to me to be better at my position? And that was a common theme, and then you just got it to a point of frustration, and we wanted to, how do we train this? Because there's some good information coming out there, but how do you physically train that, and what does it look like? Because everyone is time poor. Every minute of the training day is being taken up. So how can we work in parallel without taking up any training time? And then actually, what do we want to train? And we started to look at cognition. And in the early days, we really focused on, I'm not sure if you know about working memory, but for us, it was really, we need to look after working memory because that's the thing that's going to allow someone to make a good decision under pressure. And in a nutshell, we've got, and hopefully there's no neuroscientists out there that are going to shut us down to the nth degree, but we've got something in our brain which is working memory, and it's the size of a pea, so it's not very big. And whatever you take in the environment, so what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you can touch, just comes in a big garble, and it sits in working memory. And it's only going to sit there for about 20 seconds. And hopefully your long-term memory, where your skills and knowledge sits, takes that garble of information and comes back and gives you a decision to go and do something. But if you do nothing with it, then it disappears on you. So that's a problem for us. The next thing, under no pressure, you can only hold, everyone's different, but you can only hold about anywhere from 3 to 7 bits of information in working memory, and it's full. So that's the problem. We can't take too much in. And the other problem is if you get stressed, stress lives in working memory. So if I'm stressed out in a game and I filled up 3/4 of my working memory with stress, good luck if I can hold 1 or 2 chunks of information. So I'm going to miss. So we looked at that and thought, well, let's do all our training to keep capacity in working memory. So the things that we train based on science is the 2 big ones for us: self-awareness, being aware early on, what are the signs to you that you're heading in the wrong direction and starting to fill up working memory. So for us, we look at are you angry, frustrated, emotional, self-doubting, fearful, taking in too much information. All those signs, swearing, that's a heads up to you early on that you're heading in the wrong direction, and we need to get it back. So now we move into arousal control. What can we do minimally that's not going to take up working memory? Because another thing that fills up working memory is the harder you have to think, the quicker working memory will fill up. So that comes back to your training. I've got to overtrain stuff that I don't have to think so hard. I already know what I'm going to do now, and I execute. Then we look at attentional control. I only want to bring into working memory what's important to me now. So don't be trying to look at too many things too far down the track, because you'll fill up your working memory. We work on an acronym called WIN. What is important to you right now? And that's the only information I want to bring into working memory. Because if I worry about something else, I'm going to fill that up. So we have attentional control we work on. We have cognitive control, which in its basic form is just, if plan A isn't working for you, do you have the cognitive control to switch to another plan? And you see that quite often. Again, I suppose if we look at rugby, how many times has someone called a move because there was a gap? But they haven't seen that because their working memory's full, they haven't seen that sight pitch has changed now. That move's not on, but they call it anyway. So they didn't have the cognitive control to be able to adjust the move. And operational habit, what skills do you need to overlearn so I don't have to think as much? So that's what we wanted to train, and we developed a program around that. But at the end of the day, it's just all about keeping capacity in this thing called working memory. So whatever your sight picture is, it sits in working memory, and your skills and knowledge can pick up on that and make a decision. And if you look at, as an example, I suppose, situational awareness, you hear that sort of being bandied around. Oh, this person didn't have situational awareness. But quite often we call it looking and not seeing. So I could be looking at something in the room. So tactically, I could look in the room and I know there's a shotgun on the table. My eyes have seen it, and have sent that signal to my working memory. There's a shotgun on that table. Because my working memory's full, that image is gone. It's disappeared. So it never taps my skills and knowledge to say there was a shotgun. It wasn't that I didn't see it. It was just that my working memory was full and that object disappeared on me. So again, if you're getting stressed out in a game, you might be looking directly at the opposition, but you're probably not seeing that the sight pitch has changed on you because your working memory's. So I think that's the difference. We're working hard out on cognition and making sure it's trained as opposed to. So both important but different.
So we talked about this before, like it's 60 minutes into a game and a player under massive pressure, maybe like a scrum, 5 minute scrum, massive pressure. And then all of a sudden they know exactly what they've got to do, but they basically get a black screen. They just freeze. What's happening in the mind in that person in that particular moment? Because they train for pressure, but they still freeze.
Yeah, I'd go working memory full. Working memory is full. It's and if it's full of stress, as soon as you get into hard out, starting to get into fight, flight, and what we call heading towards an amygdala hijack, then when you're getting hard out into fight, flight, what the brain wants to do is go, I'll take charge. We're going to throw you into a bit of an amygdala hijack. And as soon as we do that, the first thing that the brain's going to do is turn off your ability to tap into your skills and knowledge. Your thinking part of your brain gets shut down because in a hijack or hard out and fight flight, I either want to fight or run. And actually, I don't give a shit about anyone else but myself. So everything goes out the window, and that's what we talked about previous. You see people are dumbfounded, absolutely dumbfounded why they couldn't execute because they've done something so many times before that all of a sudden it just went away on them. That's because they allowed the stress response to fill up their working memory. They went into sort of like a fight flight and their brain started to shut down. So it was harder to think. I'm not sure if you have the same analogy over there, but it's really important when we're talking to the teams that we can relate. What language do they relate to? And sort of everyone over here has always heard the saying, oh, look at that person, their cup's full. There's sort of lights on and nobody home. So quite often now, instead of talking working memory, we just say, what's the capacity of our cup? How full's the cup? And then how are we gonna deal to that? And how can we get back to optimal with arousal control that's not going to take us out of the fight, or that's not going to take us out of the game? And what does that look like? And so we've got a specific way we train arousal control. And this is where, again, it becomes a little bit contentious with, you can hear a lot of people talking about cog now and talking about how to perform under pressure. But if you look at one aspect of it in breathing, a lot of people will say, just breathe. Don't forget to breathe. But if I'm in a stress response, I might think I'm breathing right, but probably 9 times out of 10, I'm breathing fast and shallow. So I'm just keeping myself in a stress response. And then you see other breathing techniques that just won't fit if you're in the heat of the battle. You can't do that. Actually taking that out of the game. And one of the breathing protocols that was really bandied around a lot a few years ago was box breathing. Everywhere we looked, they said, oh, you've got to box breathe. That'll get you back to optimal. But once we broke it down, and box breathing is you breathe in slow 4 seconds, you hold your breath 4 seconds, you exhale over a 4-second count, and you hold your breath again for 4 seconds. We got the operators in and we got them physically and mentally stressed, and we got their heart rates up to 160, and we said, okay, everyone box breathe. And lucky if they could get to 2 seconds in, and everyone was dying for air. And so it became more of a stress response. Secondly, the problem with that is you've got to think about how to breathe. If I'm thinking about how to breathe, I'm automatically filling up my working memory now. So now I'm losing my situational awareness because I'm listening to that internal voice in my head instead of being externally focused on the sight picture. So we ditched that, and we needed a breathing technique that we train that takes minimal thinking. We train it so it sort of happens automatic and pretty well keeps working memory open, and it allows them to keep their situational awareness. It's just lots of little things like that sometimes you've always got to look at maybe what people are saying you should do, and we run it through you, but is it going to keep them externally focused so they don't lose their situational awareness? And we need them not to be able to think about what they're going to do next breathing, because that's going to fill up the working memory. Yeah.
Just a quick question there, Ken. I mean, obviously we're talking about helping individuals within the team, and I'm looking at this from perhaps another side. Like you mentioned, causing chaos in a conflict situation before, and I'm thinking my main business is headhunting, and I always tell my clients to put people under pressure. So, like, is there ways that you can predict that the opposition, you could put them under pressure to cause the chaos, and where you can do it? To get into their psyche? Do you use those scenarios?
I'll give you an example of one session that we would use. So when I did Canterbury, and I thank Glenn for that, because he took it on board for that session. Probably didn't really know what COG was, but he gave us the heads up to be able to experiment with them, and probably since then to now, we've moved on considerably. We're like at the infant stage when we were then. But if you look at the gym, we wanted to test if a player, if they're doing new moves, how can we tell that it's sitting in a place where they don't have to think hard about that move? It's just almost going to naturally happen for them. And we want to do training where they get a lot of information coming at them all at once. And when they first start training that, it just all turns to shit. But when you're new through the tactical teams, that if we keep training it, then they get more and more and more comfortable with taking on a lot of information. And again, it comes back to the chaos, because others might be in chaos and there's a lot of stuff happening and a lot of information, but it's not chaos to them because they've trained having lots of information coming at them. And it's almost with tactical, we got them into a flow state where they appeared to be, say, if they were clearing a building looking for the bad person, it might look from the outside in that they're moving really fast, and how can they do that? But to them it wasn't fast because they'd trained enough with their technical tactical plus taking in lots of information at once. It was actually in their comfort zone. So we wanted to do that with rugby, but we also wanted to know, did they truly know what the new move was? And if they didn't truly know as a team, if we were tracking them as individuals what the move was on Thursday, then it would be nice to be able to go back to the coaches and go, you can execute the move if you want on the weekend, but they're going to have to think hard about it. So you might find that Johnny's called the move because he's seen a gap, but because he's been thinking so hard about how to execute that move, that gap's not there anymore, but they've called the move anyway. So you might want to ditch it. And so that was one way to train. And the way that we would train it, they might have a gap in their lifting. So while they had a gap in the lifting in the gym, we would get them over to do some form of, we had various forms of agility that we would do that really filled up their working memory. And then we'd either show them a sight picture of a field setup and go, what move is that? And under pressure, if they locked up and went, took too long, then we knew it wasn't where it needed to be. But if we kept training it under distraction, and we could get to Thursday and they pretty well could look at the sight picture of whatever we showed them or asked them to explain, then it should give the coaches high confidence that as a team, that move is sitting where it needs to sit. Yeah, and I suppose the other way, which is, again, not my lane, but sometimes I feel how many new moves do we need to keep doing? Because if you do an old move that the opposition know, but everyone in your team can execute it without thinking and at speed, then if it was a line out, practically run to the line out, call the move and execute, because the other team might know what the move is, but they have to think about it, and it's going to fill up their working memory, and they're going to be slow to execute. So sometimes it doesn't matter a shit if the opposition knows your move. If it's well ingrained in your team, what happens if you can execute at speed, and it's not speed to you? I just find that interesting.
That's fascinating stuff. I mean, did you have any to build to that point where you could execute under pressure or help teams under pressure prepare for a line out or a scrum? Would you just fatigue them physically, or as you were mentioning there, give them something cognitively to think about and then build up that pressure? How did that look on a practical basis for you?
Yeah, so if we look at I'll sort of give a snapshot of a gym session within the tactical team. So usually for them, it's a high intensity interval training. So we want them to do maybe 4 minutes of work going hard out. And then they got anywhere from 1.5 to 2 minutes where it's a break before they get into the next high intensity. So through the session, we might grab 2 of them at a time, 1 at a time, 4 at a time, but we grab them as soon as they've finished high intensity. So we know their heart rates are up around 180. And then we might throw them into a cognitive shoot where they've been given a job brief on a job right at the beginning, and then they have to run through this cognitive shoot. And it's been designed that their heart rate's up, so they need arousal control. They need attentional control, cognitive control. They better have good operational habits, so weapons handling. And they're just getting bombed with it. And so there's a lot being put onto working memory, and they do the shoot, and we score it. And at the end of the shoot, then we'll go, oh, by the way, the job brief we gave you a minute and a half ago, can you describe who the offender is? What was the number plate of their car? What was the address they had to go to? So it's really just training. And one thing about the program, it's designed to be bespoke for the individual team. So, the architecture overall, the architecture is the same, but how we train the counter-terrorism team is going to look different from how we train the tactical dog team. And again, if you're coming into a rugby context, how you would train that rugby team would be different from how we train tactical. So we come into a team and see what is their role, where are their stresses, and how do we tailor the training to make it operational for that team. That's a big part of the program. So it's just not one size fits all. It's really coming in and seeing that organisation. And some of it can be as simple as sitting down with everyone or sitting down with the coaches and go, what language do you want to use? What's the language that you want to use for this team for certain things? And once they've written that down, you go, right, you can't deviate away from that language now. So from the CEO down to the cleaner, everyone needs to speak the same language. And if you do that, you'll get a strong neural pathway and you'll be able to execute quick. But if you have, if you want to look at a sight picture and you have one person saying eyes up and another person saying head on a swivel and another person saying something else, that's 3 different neural pathways now. So your signal's going to be not as strong. It's going to take longer to execute. So it's really lots of little stuff like that. Need to identify, but once you identify it, we'll test it. Probably a good one for us to first get in. If we walk into a facility and they have their, you usually see at the wall of the gym or somewhere what they live by. It might be, teamwork. They might have empathy. Whatever they have. We go, is this what you live by? And they go, yep. We go, great. We're going to test it. And again, we'll put them under the pump and say, okay, tell us what the team lives by. It's written up in the gym. Way you go. And if they go, oh shit, is it this or then you can go back to leadership and go, that's just a bunch of words that they're not living by. So that's not your culture. That's just words on a wall. So if it's not your culture, then you may as well take them down. But if it is, you need to train it so they can actually say that to you without thinking and actually start to do it. Otherwise, it's just words, no action. So I see that quite a bit. Military, tacticals, that's the first thing we test. If that's written up there and you think that's your culture, we'll test.
Not at all. How do you when you identify that the language within the team, the business, the units, whatever environment you're in, there are using different language. How do you go about closing that gap? Is that something that you guide? Is that something you put back to them? How do you get them all on the same page?
Well, we always make sure that they own it. So they're the ones we show why it'll slow them down, and so why it affects decision making. So that's the why behind, and then we'll go to the bosses. So what language do you want to use? And then so they've given us the language. So if we go out on a training day then and we pick up some people are using different language, then it becomes a debriefing point. And they square it away. And I think that's really important. It's not us coming in saying, you must do this, you must do that. We come in and go, what does this team want? We're training decision making under pressure, but we need these things. So what language do you use? And then, once we've got that, then it can be something that we can pick up on in training and feed back as a debrief and giving the consequences to why it's going to affect their decision making under pressure if we don't square them away. And so I think we've been lucky, really. Every group we've gone into, you have to create the environment. So again, it's a word that gets bandied around a lot, high performance environment. But what does that look like? And is that just a buzzword, or are you actually living this high performance? And so for us, if we're looking at high performance, by definition, you have to push yourself. You can't stay in your comfort zone. And if you're pushing yourself, you're going to get to a failure point. And that's what we want. We want to get it to where it's a failure point. We'll train it some more so that level of stress isn't a failure point anymore, and we'll take it to the next failure point. And that's how we grow and get better. However, you have to have the environment where the operator feels comfortable to go to a failure point and not going to get their head knocked off. And there is rules around that. It's different if the same individual is doing the same thing and we've told them 3 or 4 times in a row. That's a different issue. But you have to create the environment where they want to work for it and they're pushing themselves to get to a failure point. Because if you don't have that and everyone's too scared to do that, then you're sitting in your comfort zone, and that's not high performance. Something wrong in the group.
Yeah,
and
pressure really is good.
Yeah, they actually bust to really acknowledge what they're doing well, but these are our next work on. So that was, again, language for us. We didn't want to hear, excuse my language, but we didn't want to hear at the end of a run-through or training that, I fucked up. I didn't do this. So this didn't go well for me. And all we want to hear is, first of all, we'll acknowledge, in your mind, it might have been a total shit show what you did, but there will be something that you executed well. So let's get that one acknowledged. But what's your, and again, we don't want to fill up working memory. So what's your 2 non-negotiable work-ons for the next run-through?
Again, this has been fantastic, so interesting. The gap you've spent your career working on between what people know and how to do and how they actually deliver under pressure is absolutely fascinating, and you've built the system. Thank you so much for joining on the business end. As Liam said, I concur. This has been really absorbing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.